Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So, little summary of where we've started this mimer. Started speaking about the whole relationship between several ideas, which seem to be very unrelated whatsoever. So you have the first one, which is of course Shabbat and the weekdays. We're leaving Shabbat and leaving the weekdays and going into Shabbat. And then we compared, of course, Shabbat to a queen. So you have the idea of a king and queen. King and queen is also relevant to the concept of a bride and groom. And then you have God and the Jewish people. And along with that, you have this Kabbalistic concept of Zah and Malchut, which is the male and the female. And so all of these things kind of line up nicely. You've got the male aspect of things, we have the female aspect of things, and we're going to talk about it. It's generally reflected as the giver, which is the male, and the receiver, which is the female. So the giver is a reference to the weekday. The weekday, of course, was we work on the weekday to be able to provide for Shabbat, and that's, of course, what Talmud says, that Misha Tarach Be'erev Shabbat Yochal b'Shabbat, whoever works on the day before Shabbat is able to eat on Shabbat. It's this idea of giving, and then Shabbat becomes the receiver, king and queen. All the other ones are a little bit more obvious. So we're going to explore this dynamic of relationships. And so for that, I want to ask you, what would you say, we can go around the table, so to speak, what would you say is the process of beginning a relationship? What is the first stage of a relationship? Anybody want to chime in on that?
Somebody has to want to give.
Okay, excellent. And so there's the desire to give, which is obviously stage number one. And then what's the next part of the process?
You have to have two people. You have to have a giver and a receiver. I mean, you can't be by yourself.
Yep.
And there has to be acknowledgement that there's something there to give also.
Excellent. Excellent. A little bit more. Anybody else?
There has to be an introduction between two people.
Excellent. And talk to me a little bit about that introduction.
They have to present themselves in a presentable manner that the other one will want to have a relationship with them.
Bingo. That's where we're going. That the relationship is such that there needs to be a creation of a space of giving and an interest in receiving. And that's exactly where we're going. And of course, this idea is central to marriage, to education, and really to any relationship whatsoever. So we're going to look at chapter 2, where the previous Rebbe is going to give two analogies for relationships, and then afterwards we're going to explore these. And in the Rebbe's mimer that we'll learn afterwards, we'll really break them down in a much more, a much deeper level. Right now, they're going to look very surface level in this mimer, but then the Rebbe really shows you how much greater these analogies are. So to understand this idea, let's explore the following Talmudic anecdote. Before the great sage Rabbah would address his students, he would begin with a humorous riddle. The students would laugh, and then they would respectfully prepare themselves for the lecture, and he would begin. So this is classic teaching styles, is to be able to, create an environment. And so Rabbah, we're talking about going back 2,000 years ago, 2,200 years ago, maybe less, 1,800 years ago, somewhere around there, that he had this skill that he would begin with either a joke or a riddle, and people would get a kick out of it. And as a result of that, he was able to sit down and teach. And so the previous Rebbe opens this up. He says, in this case, the giver is the teacher, and the recipients are his students. The teacher uses the riddle to create a proper receptacle for learning. he has established a relationship that prepares the recipient for what will follow. And this must be done in accordance with the level of the recipient. One may think that riddles and jokes are of no importance or relevance, but the truth is that even the standard conversations of a Torah scholar contain great wisdom. And nevertheless, these jokes or riddles are external when compared to the lecture that follows. So you have this idea that we're going to explore, that we began exploring, talking about the chuppah, the process of the chuppah, that first the groom greets his bride and he places the veil over her face. Then afterwards, he goes to the chuppah, then afterwards she comes to him. And the previous rabbi had explained in the previous chapter that this is the idea of the giver accessing an external facet of the receiver. So in the case of the teacher, what would happen if you were teaching a class on advanced nuclear physics and you just began immediately by spouting formulae? What would be the reaction of your students?
There's no connection. There's no connection, you know?
Exactly. There's no connection. There's been no preparatory stage. You have not done anything to be able to begin a process. We had a teacher in high school who was a science teacher. He was probably on the spectrum, is my guess. But at some point, the grade above me did not come in from recess, and they just stayed out playing during recess. And when they finally came into the classroom, he was there up on the chalkboard, writing things on the chalkboard. And they said to him, Dr. Schral, we weren't here. What were you doing? He said, they pay me to teach. I don't care if there's students here or not. He was wrong. They didn't pay him to stand up there in front of the chalkboard and scribble things on the chalkboard. The purpose of the teacher is to bring the students to a level of understanding. And this is very, very interesting because many teachers don't understand that. They think that the process of teaching is one of stuffing information. And so there has to be this process. You need to know who your students are. It's one of the problems on Zoom is that I can't really interact with you in a way where I truly understand who you are and you know where you are and all that kind of thing. So, but that's the advantage and the disadvantage of the medium at the exact same time. The advantage, of course, is the capability that we have. I'm in Tampa. You guys are wherever you are. But the disadvantage is, of course, I don't have that capability, and I just have to guess. But in a proper teaching circumstance, I need to be able to assess where you are, and the way to do that is to be able to prepare the surface, to be able to begin things off. And the previous Rabbi explains what's going on, what's happening in that process. He says that the purpose of beginning the class with a joke is to uplift the students to such a level that appears to be on equal footing with the teacher. Students oftentimes don't recognize as much their distance from a teacher. I'm saying in high school or whatever it is. And so there needs to be a rapport, and that rapport is in a place of equality. And if you begin things by blowing someone away, you have destroyed any rapport. You have to be able to relate. You need to be able to break things down. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that. You need to be able to break things down into the level where the person can be able to receive on their level. And so that begins with a process. And the first part of the process, and this is the key, is to get into their space. And then afterwards, you can lift them up into your space. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this mimer and in this process. This process of understanding where the recipient holds and to be able to meet them in their, whether it's emotional, intellectual, physical, or spiritual space, whatever the relationship is, meet them in that dimension and to bring them somewhere else. So the Rebbe continues, he says, the teacher's intellectual capability is obviously well beyond his students, and the students must recognize and respect that. But the joke brings the teacher and student to intellectual proximity, and this prepares the students' minds to receive the wisdom of the teacher. I want to go back for a second. The fact that the previous Rebbe says that the standard conversations of a Torah scholar contain great wisdom. That is a Talmudic saying, and that's extremely important to remember, because when we're talking about people on the level of the sages and such, we're not talking about people who are standard. We're talking about people who measure every word that they say. And so therefore, even flippant remarks are not flippant. They have wisdom. So I'll give you an example. Rabbi Moshe Feller is a shliach in Minnesota, and he was once asked to run the Seder at Machon Chana. Machon Chana is the Women's Institute in Crown Heights, meant for Jewish women who are starting to learn about their heritage. So he came and he had his son there, and his son, of course, was going to give over the 4 questions. And before the Rebbe went to his own Seder, the Rebbe would oftentimes stop. Excuse me. Stop at other Seders, stop at the yeshiva, stop at either, for a couple of years, there were Persians that were brought out from Iran, and the Rebbe made sure to stop at their Seders. There was a Russian Seder, and several of them, the Rebbe would speak to them and give them blessings. Some fascinating things that happened in each one of these. But in this particular one, the Rebbe turned to Rabbi Feller and pointed to his son and said, did he ask the questions, the 4 questions? And Rabbi Feller said yes. And so the Rebbe said, did he get the answer? And everybody kind of laughed. It was kind of a cute moment, whatever it was. And the Rebbe gave everybody a blessing, went out. The next morning, the Rebbe called Rabbi Feller into his office and said, everybody thought that I was making a joke, but I want to point out what I was trying to say. The child intuitively understands that in Judaism, there's no such thing as rituals. And the Rebbe used the English term rituals. He knows that he asked the same questions last year, and you're giving the same basic answer this year. And so therefore, the question that he is truly asking is, why is this night different from last year? And did you answer that question? Did you give him an answer which is relevant to where you are and where the people here are? And that shows him that the Seder is not just ritualistic. It is something that is of eternal relevance, and every single time it's told with a new energy and a new place. So there's this beautiful, beautiful idea that the Rebbe was just basically kind of just insinuating, and then the Rebbe said, decided that, they didn't get it. I'm going to really break into this a little bit more and show them what I was trying to say. And there are many other stories like that where the Rebbe will make, or famous rabbis will make some kind of comment which seems to be a flippant comment or a sarcastic comment, and it ends up being something much deeper. In fact, there's a great story of the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe of Shmuel, when he was not a Rebbe. He went somewhere with his brother, and his brother said, basically, we don't give any blessings to anybody. We're just going on our father's mission. And so he agreed. So they made a pact. They're not going to give anybody any blessings. They're just doing what they need to do, whether it was collect money or whatever it was. But there was a woman there who was absolutely insistent she needs to have children, and she hadn't had children for many years, and she was absolutely insistent. And the Rebbe Marash, again, who was not the Rebbe at the time, he was just a young man, he couldn't get this woman to let go. And finally, he used, in frustration, he used the Yiddish term, "Geh bach a bagel," go bake a bagel. And the woman said, "Ah, thank you," and went off. And basically, the next year, the husband came over to him, basically thanking the Rebbe Marash profusely. He said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you gave my wife advice, and she had twins." He said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so when they started talking about what had happened the previous year, he remembered he made this comment, and he said to this man, "What did your wife do?" He said she went immediately home, and she said, "One bagel's not enough." She put 2 bagels in the oven, and we had twins. So when we're talking about spiritual giants on this level, even a sarcastic comment that they might not even be thinking intuitively to what it could be, can be the access into a spiritual place that we don't understand. So that, just understand that what Rabbi was saying were not just simple as they were, but in the context of the class, the purpose was to be able to create the rapport, create the relationship, make sure that there is an even space. Any thoughts about that so far? Okay. The second analogy.
Rabbi,
Go ahead. Yes, please.
on the story about the Rebbe and the Seder of the Baal Teshuvas, wouldn't it have been more effective if the rabbi didn't understand it? I'm sure the Baal Teshuva didn't understand it either. Wouldn't it have been more effective if he explained it that night?
Maybe. I don't know. I can't. I'm just telling you the story. I don't know what was inside the Rebbe's head at the time. I can only tell you what happened.
Okay.
It's very possible that because the Rebbe waited and then explained it to him the next day, it was more impactful because of the fact that Rabbi Feller was so shocked by being called into the Rebbe's office. So maybe that was part of the psychological impact. But that's just guesswork, and I'm not quite sure. Good question. I apologize because I'm on my phone, so I don't necessarily see hands raised. But now, when I was flipping through that, I see Mr.
Susan
Resnick.
and
What would you like
Ben.
to say? What was that?
Susan wants to ask a question and Ben
Yes.
wants to.
I just
Okay, Susan, go ahead.
want to make a comment that throughout my upbringing, my father always sat at the table on Sunday morning. We sat for 3 hours and ate breakfast. We didn't sit and eat for 3 hours. We listened to him, and he was a very devout Jewish man, and my mother was also very devout. But I didn't realize it at the time what he was teaching me and teaching the family, because he didn't make it so obvious that these were Jewish ideals and Jewish ethics. I didn't know it at the time. But he made learning fun and interesting, and that was an immensely important thing to teach young children, is that something should be fun, and especially learning.
Absolutely. It's tragic. It's absolutely tragic when it's not like that. We took my son to a public school for a few days, and it it was nothing but a tragedy just to see what was going on in this public school, because it was just cramming information. These 5-year-old kids were confined to desks, and they were just doing math problems and spelling problems for Common Core, and there was no joy there whatsoever. There was no development, and it's just a tragedy. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say, as far as the comment to bake a bagel, did she understand it to be to make a baby and put 2 in, or did she just by mistake put 2 in?
The way I understand the story is that she had total and absolute faith that she was being given like a kamea kind of thing, that basically that a holy rabbi is telling me what to do. I'm not just going to do 1, I'm going to do 2. She was going to go over the top. That was her understanding.
All right, so
but
she
the catalyst,
understood it.
right. The catalyst to do it was, without question, was her spiritually speaking, was her faith. It obviously wasn't the bagel itself. It was the fact that, like, okay, I believe. Go ahead.
I don't think she was doing a dozen.
Right. Then she might have complained. So that's an important one. Next, the second part is also very, very important. Another example of this process is between a toddler and his father. When the father wants to play with his son face to face, he reaches downward and lifts the child up to meet him on his level. This reaching downward is likewise external. It is only being done for the purpose of lifting the child. In fact, the child does not even receive anything from the process of being lifted. Only when the 2 of them are at eye level can play occur. But for that internal impact to happen, the recipient, the child, must be brought to the level of the giver, in other words, the father, through the external lifting process. So likewise, you have this idea, the relationship of the father and child, where there needs to be play, there needs to be a relationship, there's something that needs to go on, there needs to be access there, and that has to be, the father needs to bend down, whether that means literally or figuratively, and access the child. And I found that, as a father, I found this to be so important and such an important reminder, because it's so difficult, because you're, as an adult, we're living in an adult world, and the children are living in child worlds, and we have all these stresses and pressures and everything on top of us. And how do we relate down to our children or grandchildren? And the answer is, we have to get into their space. We have to go down to their level. If we want the relationship, it's not just going to be for us to bring them to us and, hand them something, or, tell them these ideas, like Susan said, okay, just, all right, here's the Jewish ideal, I want you to pick it up. You have to get down and play. And you need to go into their space. You need to lift them up. You need to bring them over to you. They will not be able to access the, so to speak, adult world, because that's not where they are. They are children. And I found this idea to be so important, because so often we can get so frustrated with children for being children, and they don't understand. We don't understand, why can't they, grow up? But the answer is, it's not possible for them to be able to get there unless we lift them up. So these are the 2 stages of relationships. Anybody have a comment about that one? That one, I think that's that one that has also a lot of personal relevance. And if anybody has a comment, please speak up.
I was just going to say that the idea of baking the bagel is like an expression, like go fly a kite.
Yes.
Just to clarify for everybody.
Yeah, it was absolutely go fly a kite. And if she would have been told to go fly a kite, she would have gone and flown the kite. But there's something beautiful in that she was basically like, okay, this is my access to a spiritual blessing.
She might have flown 2 kites.
That's right. As long as it was not in the lightning storm, she become the Russian Benjamin Franklin.
One thing I think that's very important is that the process of baking is a very motherly thing. And sometimes it's a relaxing thing to do, for me anyway. It's if I'm frustrated, if I'm upset, I go start to cook.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a catharsis element of it. There's without a question. But what we're seeing here is this idea that there's something that needs to be done externally, and that allows access to what we call internal process. The external part of the process seems to be really, really shallow and simplistic. But the internal part of the process seems to be really the goal. And okay, that's what I want to get to. And people easily forget about the external part of the process because they're so focused on the end goal, and they don't realize that in order to be able to make it a smooth process, you have to have both sides of the process. In order to be able to give, like somebody said before, there needs to be a recognition that this relationship is about give and take, that this is what I'm giving you, and this is why I'm giving it to you. But that point only comes after the process to which there's been a commonality created, some kind of commonality, in order for any relationship to be able to begin. And so these concepts are very, 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 very important. So now we're going to have to spin all of that back and try to understand that with regards to God and the Jewish people, Shabbat and the weekday, with regards to Chatan and Kala, the bride and groom, with regards to the general concept of male and female, and with regards to the idea of even the spiritual ideas of Zah and Malchut. Each one of those needs to be understood in this framework, that this concept comes as a result of this spiritual truth. In other words, our understanding that this is how a relationship works comes as a result of knowing that this is the way godliness works. And as a result of that, we can access it. So what we're going to do in the next chapter is we're going to talk about it with regards to Hashem and the Jewish people, how Hashem gives us certain things, and we have the ability to be able to access that and create something, and then go to a different place, which is a totally and absolutely new space, a new space of the relationship. And we'll take that with regards to daily service. And then this mimer kind of ends off pretty quickly, but don't worry, the Rebbe is going to really extrapolate this concept further. And I don't want to go into it too much because I don't want to, blow the game, so to speak. I don't want to reveal where the Rebbe is going to go on into it, which is really, really fascinating. But next Wednesday, God willing, we will finish this mimer. You know what? We'll probably actually finish it next week. We'll probably split chapter 3 into two pieces, and then we will continue. Did you receive the second mimer along with this? Did Rabbi Smith send that out, or did he only send one PDF?
We have one that looks like it's, I'm looking to see, it's 2 or 3, it's 3 chapters. That's all we got, was one with 3 chapters.
Okay. So you will soon receive the next one, which is, if I remember correctly, it's 5 chapters. And that one is the Rebbe's explanation of this mimer, explains the analogies and really, really breaks them down into their spiritual counterparts and gets very, very, very practical with them. So I'll ask Rabbi Smith to send them out next week, and we can sort of go from there. Let's see. Is Rabbi Smith here? Not quite yet. He's not yet. any comments about this this concept, and then I begin my drive back
Can I be
to.
can I be nosy, Rabbi?
Please do go ahead.
Why are you in Tampa?
I'm on my base. My base is
Oh.
MacDill Air Force Base. So I was on
I
base
see.
teaching yesterday,
I see.
and now I'm heading back to Miami. And I've got my full coffee next to me, and I begin now that Rabbi Smith is here. I begin the drive.
Be well and drive safe.
Absolutely. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.